Tonight we're going to be covering one of the most useful post-production workflows, and it's used left and right, and it's when you get some footage and it wasn't shot against a green screen, or you need to track your footage to a device because no one films with the actual screen up. So it's a very handy thing to know. Each clip is only about 4 seconds long. I did that to keep the file sizes small and so that not everyone is like crushing their rendering power on their computers. Alright, now a couple things with using the Roto brush. The more contrast and color you have and the sharper something is, the better rotoscoping is going to go. You don't want to start on something blurry. This is nice and crisp. I'm going to drop my resolution down to 1/4. Well, actually, no, I'm going to keep it at full because if I drop it down, sometimes when you're doing rotoscoping, you'll get error messages, especially when we go into Mocha. So my Roto brush is up here. I'm going to zoom in on that in a second. The Roto brush is right next to the puppet pin tool. Up here at the top. So there's your Roto brush next to the puppet pin tool. And to start roto brushing, you need to be in your layer, not the timeline. And I told a lot of people when you first start off and you accidentally double click on a layer and it opens up the layer panel, that, just close that layer. But this is when you actually do want to double click on the layer you want to roto. So it's your film clip down here, you double click on it, and now you're in the layer. So there's your comp, and here's the layer. Was everyone able to find the Roto brush and double click on the video clip to open it in its own layer window? Okay, looks like no one has any questions. The Roto brush is a way of bringing, well, I should say it's a way that you can separate something out that wasn't shot on a green screen. And if you've got a Wacom tablet, it will work with brush sensitivity. So it's good for silhouetting out hair that's flowing around. And sometimes it works a little bit better than keying out because of some of these controls. Now, I'm changing my brush size. As you can see here, I'm doing that by you hold down the Control or Command key, hold it down, and then click and hold down with your mouse and move up or down with your mouse. You're not using the mouse wheel. You hold down Control or Command, click once, and then start dragging your mouse up or down, and that will make your brush larger or smaller. Okay? Does anyone have any questions about changing your brush size? Now, the next thing we're going to do is, before we start roto brushing, I want you to know you don't need to be exact. Like if I just drew a line here, it's going to select some, and I'm not going to the edge, but see, it's selecting a lot of it. Let me delete that. There we go. Delete that. There's my beginning part. Okay, so I'm going to delete that. Alright. First thing you want to do is color correct so you can get some contrast and some color. And like I said before, I shot this in log. So I'm going to type in Lumetri and I'm going to apply Lumetri color to this. So I'm going to go back to my composition. I'm going to close out that window and I'm going to delete my Roto brush effect. I just wanted to give you a quick little intro. So first I'm going to color correct it. I throw my color correction on and I'm going to twirl down so that you can see what I'm going to do. I'm going to twirl down where it says creative. And then in my look, I'm going to choose browse. Now, some cameras have their own lookup tables, LUTs, L-U-Ts. My camera has its own lookup table. So I'm going to work off of that. And it's in the canvas folder. It's the one that's XT2, Flog, Eterna. Okay. This is the LUT for my camera. LUT lookup table. And as I said before, some companies make their own LUTs for their own cameras to try and get the best image because, you know, it's good business for them if your work looks good. And I'm going to make a couple adjustments to this. I'm going to up the contrast. Well, first I'm going to sharpen it. I'm going to type in 60. 60 is really high. I normally don't go above 40, but by doing this, I'm going to have a crisper image. It's almost like when you're in camera raw and you choose the clarity. It's kind of like bringing clarity back to a video clip. You don't want to go too large, but for this, we are going large to begin with because you can edit this afterward. And then I'm going to up the saturation a little bit. So I'm going to go over here and take a look at that. So my image is a little bit more saturated, and I sharpened it, and then I'm going to just go to basic corrections, and let's up the contrast a little bit and zoom out so we can see what we're doing. Okay, that should help a little. That might be a little too much contrast. Okay, so I put my color correction on. So now I'm going to click my Roto brush because I already got rid of the effect. I just wanted to show you the software. We color corrected, we added some contrast, and we sharpened it. So I double click on my layer, and you'll see now I've got the color corrected footage, and then the Roto brush is going after it. And this is really going to help us out. I'm going to make my brush a little bigger by holding down Control or Command, clicking on my mouse, and dragging up or down to make my brush a little larger. And like I said, you do not have to go to the edge. Watch, if I just go straight down the middle, it basically got everything there. But it looks like it missed some of this over here, so I'm going to make this a little smaller. I'm going to put it right there. Good. Now, if you get some stuff you don't want, which will happen, all you do is you hold down Alt, and you see the brush goes from green to red. You hold down Alt, and then you paint. See, it's red now, and that's going to delete the areas you don't want. So it's a cross between clicking and dragging with the green to add, and then holding down Alt or Option to subtract while you paint. Any questions on that first part? In here, you can see the area that it's previewing. And what we're going to do is you could skip ahead however many frames you want. If you want to be precise, you go frame by frame, but that's going to be very time consuming. So I'm going to do 10 frames at a time. So for me to do that, if I hold down Shift and then I hit page down, that should be 10 frames. That didn't work in here. Let me just drag my playhead to the, let's see, where am I at? Oh, so here's 12 frames. So I'll go 12 frames, just make it easier on myself. And you see right here, this green bar underneath is rendering, and it's thinking what's going on. And right now I can see the chip is getting a little close to the edge, or I should say my roto. So I'm just gonna paint a little bit there, add a little bit back, like that. And the rest of it's looking pretty good. And you just keep going forward, however many frames you want. I'm going to go 12 frames at a time. And you see my computer thinking about it. And rotoscoping is a very computer intense with the processor. That's still looking pretty good. I'm going to go a little bit forward some more. This is going to be the last one I do. It's not catching up, so I'm just going to draw a new line here. Oops, that's too much. So again, I hold down Alt or Option to delete the part that I don't want. I'm going to paint back in from the other side of the selection. And right here, you've got some options. This first one is showing you the alpha. Remember, white reveals, black conceals. So everything that's in white in my selection is going to be visible, and the part that's in black is invisible. The next button over, right down here, That's just showing you what it looks like with the alpha around it. And the next button is your quick mask. It's showing you what it looks like with a mask around it. And you could change the opacity and color of that mask if you choose to. Like I can make it dark blue. And then increase the opacity of that to help me see the edges a little bit more, because the color of my skin with that light pink, it was making it a little bit hard to see how my selection was going. And to get out of, well, once you have, we'll pretend I rotoed the entire thing. So you know you draw in the parts you want, and then you Alt or Option click to get rid of the parts you don't want. Once you've got all your brush strokes done, you click this freeze button in your layers panel. And you wait for it to render. That's why I didn't do the whole thing, because I don't want to waste your time with you sitting around watching me render all night. Okay, so I froze my brush strokes. Now I'm going to close out of my layer window up here and go back to my composition right here. And okay, so remember this button right here. This will turn off and on your alpha. And we can see it's now transparent. We can feather this selection and reduce chatter. What reduce chatter is going to do is it's going to make this a little smoother looking, not so rough. And then I'm going to feather the selection. And what that is doing, as you can see, it's not feathering the way feathering a layer mask does. It's just softening the way the edge looks. It's not making part of it transparent. And that's looking pretty decent right there. I mean, we could go in and get that little part, but let's go back here. I'm going to drop my resolution down to 1/4, and there you can see. So you can put whatever you want behind it. You've seen this in credit sequences and commercial work, silhouetting out the characters, putting things behind them, visual effects. This is basically how it's done. We could also turn on use motion blur and decontaminate the edges as well. Any questions on the basics of the Roto brush? Okay, so now you have the basic of the Roto brush. I'm going to make it a little more advanced now that you understand the basics of it. Okay, there's a clip called Me Log 2K, and I'm going to right click on that and do New Comp from Selection. And now we're going to do a little bit more complex rotoscoping. As you can see, I'm by my china cabinet, or I should say the china shelves, and this is my hair, which I had not washed or combed. There's a lot more information in here, so we're going to have a little bit more trouble tracking this shot and my bed head. So I'm going to show you a little bit more about roto brushing. Remember, the first thing we're going to want to do is use our color correction. And we already have a fairly color corrected image right here. So I'm just going to copy this effect and bring it into here and paste it onto there. And I'm going to knock down the highlights a little bit. And I'm going to fix the white balance, the temperature, just because I want this white of the shelving to look a little bit more white. And that's a good start. Let me put it at full resolution. Okay, good. All right, so we're going to build off of what we just learned. We color corrected the image, we increased its sharpness and its contrast, and it will be easier to roto brush it because see how flat that log image is. And now my hair has more pop compared to the plates and the shelves behind it. So again, I'm going to select my roto brush right up here next to the puppet pin tool and double click on my layer window to open up the puppet pinning. I mean, not the puppet pinning, I'm sorry, the roto brushing. So I just clicked and I dragged with my brush, and you can see that it got some up here. So I'm going to hold down Alt or Option to paint out that little part. Good. And this little part over here. Remember, once it turns red, that means you're going to be subtracting. And I don't need to hold down anything to add back in. Green adds back in, red subtracts. All right, so we got our roto right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click View Search Region. And you see it went gray. I'm going to change this search region to 50. And I'm going to turn off the search region. It's just showing me the area that it's looking for. Motion threshold, I'm going to reduce this to 25. Take a look at that, see if that helps us out. Just go back to the chat, make sure nobody wrote anything. Okay, damping, I'm going to put that at 40, just to try that. So I changed my motion threshold and my edge damping. Image detection, I'm going to choose favor current edges. What this is going to do, it's going to look at what I'm telling the computer to look at, not what the computer thinks it should look at. And this will give me a much more accurate rotoscoping. So I'm going to hold down Control. I'm going to click once to make my brush a little smaller. We have this little tuft of hair. You can see I'm getting some of that, but that's fine because we're just learning this tonight. I'm going to leave alternate color estimate on, and I just move forward a certain number of frames. But before I do that, here's my master frame that I created right here. I'm going to show you one new tool. If you hold down on the Roto Brush tool, there's the Refine Edge tool. And this is blue. And I'm going to do this around the hair, near the edge of the hair. And what this is going to do, as you can see, is it's going to soften the edge where the hair is. And if you want, you could do around the whole head if you don't want a crisp line. Let me hit undo. I'm going to make my brush a little smaller by holding down Control or Command and clicking and dragging. So just to be a glutton for punishment, I'm going to soften the edge on just one side of my face. And see what that does. Like that. So I'll do only one side, not the other side, just to see, so we have a comparison. Alright, there is our start off. And I'm going to move my playhead forward and wait for it to draw a frame. See the green bars? And you can see this went way off. So we got to figure out where it went so wrong. And some of this white is starting to creep in. So I'm going to switch off my refine. We'll try and fix that. We'll go forward a little bit more. And we'll go forward a little bit more. And I'm going to freeze my frames here rather than do the whole thing. But you see what? It's very time consuming. You just have to keep watching and adding and changing the shape of your mask over time. Oh, and here's the show search region. Let me reduce that down a bit. You see it's going too far around each side. So I click that on once the tracking started. There we go, now we've got a tighter area. I can turn that off now. I'll go forward a few more frames, and then I'll freeze it. Let's see, right here, I'm going to want to, this a little smaller, hold down Alt or Option, paint out there. Just like that. Oops, I did not hold down Alt or Option, like I said, right there. Missing a little bit of my neck there, that's fine. We're not doing precise and perfect tonight. And you can see why post-production is so time-consuming. And like I said before, try and avoid it whenever possible, but sometimes it is impossible to avoid. Now I'm just going to click the freeze frame right down here, bottom, and that'll just freeze all my brush strokes. And you can see it's really off. on some of those frames. But so I'm going to close my window back here, and then I can mess around with my settings over here. See, not half bad. And then you could go back in and rework it if you needed to, just by double clicking on your clip to go back into the roto brush. See, if I needed to, then I could go back, freeze it, and check it out again. But that is the basics of using the roto brush tool. And you could see how the refined edge gave me a softer edge by the hair, whereas over here my refined edge started eating in a little bit to the skin. I just wanted to show you that what's going to happen when you do that. I could always reduce this feather a little bit, decrease the contrast. Looks like it's helping out a lot. And it also depends upon the color of the background you put it on too. If I put this on a white background, it wouldn't look half bad. I mean, I would never submit it professionally, but finding a background that helps you hide any of the imperfections of your roto brushing also helps. Any questions on the roto brush? You gotta keep moving forward, let it render, paint in the parts that need to be painted in, or hold down Alt or Option and paint out the parts you don't want. And then you could do your refine edge. And down here I could do refine edge matte. Right there, I changed that to smoother. I can adjust these settings as well on the side to try and clean that up. And then that would just eat up how much processing you've got. But now, look at that. That's looking a lot better already, with just those minor tweaks that we just did. So again, like I said, it's going to be very, very time consuming, and just know that it could take you, just in rendering, you could spend maybe 10 to 15 minutes per second that you are roto brushing. That's just on the rendering, not counting actually going in and roto brushing it out. So, you know, like I said, it's not something you want to do, but this is how you do it, and now you know. So the roto brush, it can be used, last week I used it when I just brought in an image and I didn't feel like doing a quick silhouette in Photoshop. It's good for mocking up some things if you want to just paint out parts of it and, you know, just get animating, but it's not the most perfect of tools. Now I'm going to show you how to roto using Mocha. Alright, so I can close this. Oh, one more thing I want to show you. A little while ago I did a visual effects test, and I masked out my eye, and I had to go like every few frames and sometimes every frame to correct my mask. And this is if you're just doing a quick motion pass for the idea. You could go in and use your roto brush. See something real quick. Oh, first I gotta have the roto brush on, obviously. But this is also where you could paint over video. Like if you wanted to change the eye color, then yes, you could use the paintbrush, color it, use a blending mode, stuff like that. So you see that got my eye pretty good. And if I want to get the whites of the eye, I just gotta add a little more detail in there. And like I said, it's not the most perfect of tools, but it gave me a rough idea. And then I could just keep going through and it would track the eye out. Move my playhead, wait for it to render. I can just paint in there. And you see it makes a keyframe because I painted in. Like such. Alright, so I'm going to drop out of there. And that's just showing you what I'd masked out already. Okay, and we're going to use the clip called Phone Busy Log. So I'm going to make a new comp from that selection, and here is the phone. So I shot this against a busy background. I'm going to scrub through. You see my hand come up to swipe, and it only comes up once. because I'm not a glutton for punishment, the phone tilts a bit from side to side. I'm showing you Mocha because Mocha is far more powerful than rotoscoping, and you had to learn the basic of rotoscoping before being able to understand what Mocha is going to do. So what we're going to do is I can actually, in Mocha, have a quick roto brush over my hand and set it to ignore that hand. And that won't mess up the tracking, because if I tried to use a 4-corner pin tracker on this, the second my hand goes into the shot, it's going to mess up the track because it's covering up one of the points. So it's a very powerful plugin in After Effects, and it's definitely worth brushing up on because it helps speed up your workflow immeasurably with a lot of things. So I'm going to go to where it's nice and crisp in my motion and in focus. And then my effects, I'm just going to type in Mocha. Well, actually, first I'm going to copy the color correction. That's the first thing. I'm going to paste that on there. Color correct it. Good. All right. So let me fix the white balance on that real fast. Okay, that's a little bit better. I can tolerate that. Alright, so I've got my color correction, and I'm going to put Mocha on next. And here it is right here, Mocha AE. And now it's at the bottom of my effects stack. There's my color, and there's Mocha. So again, make sure you've got a nice, crisp motion. You don't want a lot of blur, and you want it to be in focus. And that's where we're going to start with taking out the hand. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the Mocha button underneath Launch Mocha. I'll click there once, then Mocha's going to start up, and I'll wait for you all to open up Mocha. Okay, I see you're saying Mocha said register. There should be a thing to just launch it. Try that. Or remind me later. See if there's a button for that. And we're only going to do a little bit tonight in Mocha. I'm not going to bombard you with too much. So this might even take until next Monday to finish up this thing we're going to do. Because what we're going to do is first, we're going to rotoscope out the hand. Then I'm going to teach you to planar track. And you're going to planar track the phone. Then you're going to replace what's on the screen of the phone. And we'll blend it all together into one big effect. So what we're going to be using is the X spline tool right here. The B spline is short for Bezier. We want the X spline tool. It's right next to the magnifying glass. Right there, and I clicked on it. Here's how the X spline tool works. You click once, and then you just keep clicking around, and when you want to end, you right click. So we're just going to take out, we don't have to do my whole hand because my whole hand doesn't cover the phone. That's one click. And when you're rotoscoping, you want to use as few points as possible, just because it's more for you to track and juggle. So I'm just doing as few as I can. And this part doesn't need to be super tight because we're just saying, hey, ignore this hand that's popping up over the screen before we even try and track the phone. And I want to make this right here my last point. So right here is where I'm going to right click, and that closed up my shape. I'm going to wait a moment for everyone to finish up their rough shape. And then I'm going to explain what all these handles mean and how to fix them. And this, I showed you roto brushing with the roto brush tool. It's okay. It's like trying to perform surgery with a broadsword instead of a scalpel. And Mocha is more of a scalpel. Right here, I can move one point at a time this way. So I just fixed these ones that were like a little bit off. I did those one at a time. Then I'm going to show you some bulk adjustments. I just wanted to finesse those first few that were way off. So here's what we do. A good workflow is this. I'm going to right click on one of the points and choose Selection, Select All in Spline. These are my splines. We're using X splines. So I hovered over one, right clicked, Selection, Select All in Splines. Now you can see they're all selected. Now watch what happens when I move this handle inwards, then outwards. The further out I go, the harsher my angles become. The closer in I go, the more rounded my angles become. It's a matter of finding a happy medium. And I'm going to click out, so I deselect them all. I'm just going to adjust this tiny one a little bit here, and that there. And that's looking pretty good for this rough fix. So that's how to change from harsh angles to softer curves with your splines. Any questions on moving a spline point or changing it from a harsh angle to a softer curve? I've got this selected. I'm going to go up here to my layers panel. I'm going to double click and I'm going to rename it. I'm going to call it hand. And then hit the enter key. All I did was name the layer. So here's my layer panel. There's my named splines. Then down here, now these are your forward and back tracking. I'm going to backtrack. Now for what we're doing, we're just roughly going to say, hey, ignore this shape. We don't need to worry about the perspective. We're going to tackle the perspective when we're going to worry about screen replacement. This is going to be huge, and you'll see how powerful that is. But I'm going to click this button right back here to track backwards. And I hit the stop button. And right here you can see this is my playhead. This is the part that it tracked, and the red is what it needs to track. And I can go through and one at a time I can just fix what I need to if it's off. And you can also click and drag to select multiple splines like that, and you can either scale them and rotate them in that way, or you can physically grab the line and move it. But this is a way of, I can grab these right here and move it like that because it helps you hold the shape. So you're keeping the shape faster and better, as well as moving multiple splines at a time. That's one of the tricks to doing good roto work in Mocha. Now I'm going to hit track backwards again right here and watch my hand go. Good. And what I'm going to do, since my hand's off the screen, I don't need it anymore. I'll show you a little trick. Right down here, there's a plus key, and this will add a keyframe to where we have the playhead. I'm going to click that, and now you see there's a minus. So if you need to delete a keyframe, use the minus key. If you want to add one, use the plus key. So now we've tracked up to the point where the hand comes on the screen, and it's going to move off pretty quickly. So I'm going to just hit track forward next. And track forward is this button right there. And see how it's following the shape pretty well. Let me just fix this point a little bit right there. Move that one out a little. And I'm going to grab my playhead, go backwards, watch it again. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. And like I said, this doesn't need to be super tight because we're just telling you to ignore this shape. And I'm going to hit track forward again. And it's done because that's as far of a track I need for that. I'm going to scrub back through. Couldn't write track file cache. Well, try this. Go file, save, just to save it. So just a reminder, you can move your pins this way. I mean the splines, you can move them that way. You can select all by right-clicking. Moving it out makes it harsher angles. Pushing them in makes them a little bit softer. And you can select around a bunch of them. And you could either use the transform handles, or you could just drag from there and move it. But that's one way of moving several of them at one time and keeping them together. So the last two steps are this. I turn off the gear icon right there because we're done tracking it. And then in my layer properties right below it, I'm going to go to the blend mode and I'm going to choose subtract. And what this is going to do, and this will just say, hey, ignore this when you're tracking the next thing. So when we start tracking the phone, it's going to ignore this first shape. And then I'm going to hit save. And then I'm going to exit. And then we'll be able to pick that up Wednesday. And I'm going to save this file. And there's all my Mocha stuff in there. But that was something, I'll tell you what. I did not see that coming. Getting copy claimed for my own material. That's hysterical. Once we finish up this, you'll see how Mocha is very powerful and really helps with your rotoscoping and opens up a whole bunch of possibilities for motion design, as well as visual effects. Now, I want to show you while, you're all sitting there working or thinking, you saw how this roto on the eye didn't work so hot. So I'm going to get rid of that. And I'm going to throw Mocha on the clip. Oops, just come on. I'm going to click this to launch Mocha. What we're doing for our Mocha is we're going to use the X spline tool, not the B spline. There's the X spline tool. Click. And you want to use as few points as possible. But, the right number. Because you could always go back and add more afterwards. That's another great thing about Mocha. It's better to get a good motion draft to people so that they can get an idea of what you want to do and waste all that time. And I'm going to right click there to end the shape right here. There we go. And remember, you can move the points around this way. I'm going to right click and choose selection, select all spline. When you move them in closer, see how it gets rounder. The further out, the more angular it gets. And another reminder, you can select multiple ones and either use your transform handles like that, or you can select a couple of them and just move the actual path that way, whichever way works for you. So I'm going to undo that. Just want to show you that. So that's pretty all right. And I've got my thing set up. So the next step, I'm going to name this. I'm going to call it I. Hit enter. And then I'm going to, should I do perspective? No, I'm not going to. I'll just turn it on. Can't hurt to have it on. Famous last words. And I'm going to track backwards. I got a nice sharp start point. And it's tracking backwards. I'm going to stop it right here because the eye's starting to move. And remember, you can click the key down here. Let me zoom in one more time. You can click the key to add a frame, or you can click the minus to subtract a keyframe. And I'm going to track backwards some more, like that. I'm going to add a frame right there. So I did that with 3 keyframes, and 2 of them I just used just to hold my track in place. And now I can track forward. Hang track forward right here. I'm just going to keep watching it and see that it stays. It's doing pretty good. If you want to zoom in, there's a magnifying glass tool here, and you click and drag in order to zoom in. So I'm going to keep tracking forward. And right here, I'm going to fix this just a little bit. Oops. Let me zoom in a little. I'll grab my arrow tool to fix this a little bit. So it was drifting a little high there. Okay, good. I'm going to track forward some more. Oh, I just noticed this over here. So I'm going to hit stop. This is a classic example of selecting multiple ones, holding the shape a little bit. It's just faster and easier to work that way. Then if you need to, you can go in and adjust. Now we got to see where that point went off. This went off a little bit here. That went off a little bit there. Okay, so it's off here as well. Let me go back some more. I'll see it was when the eye stretched. That did it. It's off a little bit here. I'll fix that by clicking and dragging like that. Let me scrub through some more. Okay, yeah, that's good. Fine. I'll just keep tracking forward, see what happens. And you see it's off right here. I'm going to use my transform handles this time, just for a change of pace. It's just a matter of juggling around between selecting as many as you can at one time, and then the individual ones to keep the shape as best as possible. So I'm going to hit save, and then close out of here. And then what I can do is twirl down my matte. If I click View Matte, it's going to show me. So you remember, white reveals, black conceals. So I'm going to hit Apply Matte. And there's my eye separated out. And it looks pretty smooth. It looks far better. And if I feather it, it feathers all sides like a mask feather. Additionally, you're going to see you can create masks from this if you want to go in and animate them yourself, whatever you feel like doing. So I've got my eye separated. I'm going to duplicate this footage. I don't need that top one. And what I can do is I'm going to turn off Mocha on the bottom one. And there's Mocha on the top. Because, you see, this is faded. Because I got to move that Mocha track now back above my color correction. And I can just do silly things like change the blending modes. And you can get a variety of different effects doing that. Like such. Let's try and feather that a little bit, not too much, so we don't have such a harsh line. Now, just for a change of pace, let's click Create AE Masks. And now we're going to have mask shapes. So we turn off Mocha. Hit the U key. There's my mask right there. So what I can do, if I want, I can expand this a little bit past the size that it was. See, like that. And then if I want, I can feather it while I'm here. Like such. And that's actually pretty tight. I'm just going to hit the spacebar and preview it and see if it jitters and moves around a bit. But that looks much better than when I did animated paths with masks or the Roto brush. Like Mocha doing it this way, I had a much faster workflow than using the mask tool. So it's just another tool to have at your disposal when you're designing. And if I wanted, I could use that shape as an alpha matte as well, put some texture in there if I wanted, and just keep pushing and pushing and pushing the design. But I'm just showing you what you can do with a simple blending mode. And masking that out took next to no time at all. And doing that workflow I showed you, selecting multiple lines, multiple splines at one time, and moving them around is a pretty good way to go. And then I was able to just expand the mask by converting it to a mask, hitting the AE to masks button. So let's see what that looks like. Yeah, that's great. I mean, that's barely jittering at all. I like it. And then just for the fun of it, I'm going to put a texture over it and use this as an alpha matte as well. So I'm going to save that. Save frequently so you don't lose stuff. And I'll just import a texture. Okay, so let's see where did those textures go. Here's one, and here's the other. Let's try this one just for the fun of it. And I could decide how large or small I want it, like that. Good. And I'm going to put it, I'm going to duplicate this eye, put it above it. and use it as an alpha matte. So I'm going to zoom in so you can see that. And this way it's going to keep the shape of the texture. So let me change my blend mode back to normal. And do alpha matte. There we go. Now it's inside the shape. So remember, your mask always goes over your face. There's that. And now I can change the blend mode on this to something. And remember, the light and dark pixels will respond differently based upon the blending modes. So it's all about the look you want to get. It's just a matter of playing around and trying different things. It's not bad. Now, if I want this texture to follow the eye, I would have to do a face track here, which is, well, we got some time, so why not? Let's see if we can do that. So I'm going to hide that texture. I'm going to hide that eye. Save. And remember, like I told you before, you use the ellipse tool, draw it over the face. And I'm going to make sure this eye stays on by making that mask a little wider. And then when I go to my tracker panel over here, I can go to Face Tracker Detailed Features, because I'm going to want to track the eyeball. I set my rest pose, and then I track forward. And you can see down here, I'm at frame 18, 19, and I shot this 24p, so that's about half a minute to track 1 second. So it should be done the other 2 seconds in about 2 minutes. And then I can take that tracking data and parent it to the texture so that the texture moves with the eye, and then I'll blend it, and then I'll alpha matte it, and then it'll look more deliberate. Because remember, when you're texturing things, you want them to move with them, not just have the thing move over it. That doesn't look good. It's always worth taking that extra step. We'll drop down my resolution so I can go faster. So now it's a matter of, let's line up that texture how we want it. Where do we want it? Let me see. There's the texture. Let me move it over a little bit. Okay, I like the way that looks. So I twirl down here, and here's my face tracking points. And remember, even though this is on the left side of the screen, this is the right eye. So I'm going to track it to the right eye pupil. Drag that out a little bit. There we go, right eye pupil. Track that to the right eye pupil. So here's my texture. I grab my pick whip, and I'm going to put that on the right eye pupil. And as the right eye moves, the texture moves with it. Let's parent that to the... Scroll down a little bit. Yeah, I'm going to parent it to the inner eye instead of the pupil. So as the eyeball moves around, the texture is moving with it. I like that better. Keeping it in line with the inner eye. So watch what you parent what to, because everything moves in its own way. That adds everything back in by drawing that second mask and setting it to add instead of subtract. There you go. See, then just, adding in a little bit of texture. And that's how subtle or how severe you want it to be. and it's all about playing around. You never know what you're gonna find. Each blending mode adds its own little personality to it. Oh, and I should look at it at full resolution to see what it's gonna do better. Can't believe I almost didn't notice that. Alright, hopefully everyone has a good night. I'll see you Wednesday for those of you dropping off. I think it's just me left. Again, any questions, just put them in the chat. I'm here till 8:30.